So tonight, I'm going to talk about the voices in our head. And I don't mean we've got some sort of mental illness, but normal chatter in our head. So I'm going to talk about thought chatter, the inner critic, and the inner cheerleader, all of which I've had a lot of experience with personally. So you might be thinking, well, what is this thought chatter? What is the inner critic? What is the inner cheerleader? And these are basically voices in our head that we might not even be aware of because they've been going on, talking, rabbiting on for so long in this constant chatter that we aren't even consciously aware of them anymore. So I know that I used to have this kind of feeling in my chest, but I didn't really know what the words were that matched it. But in a nutshell, it was thoughts that I wasn't good enough, and this was my inner critic, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But first I want to talk about this thought chatter. So we have talk going on in our heads all the time, but you know when you lie down at night and there's no sound, it's all peaceful, it's all quiet, it's starting to feel relaxed, and all those thoughts kind of keep popping in your head. Maybe you're reflecting over a conversation you had earlier in the day, or I don't know, the way somebody looked at you, the way you did something at work. Maybe you're thinking about anything in the past. It could be recent past or distant past, or you might even be thinking about the future. But this is kind of thought chatter, and I'm not sure thought is the right word, because thought to me is when we are deliberately thinking about something, consciously thinking, perusing over a subject with logic and reason. But this thought chatter is kind of thoughts just floating through your head that are just popping up that you've not deliberately decided to think about. And it's when we're tending to relax and quieten down and calm down, which is why I mentioned when you go to bed at night that these thoughts start to kind of fly through your mind. Now, this is perfectly normal, by the way. Do you suffer with this in particular? So for some people, particularly if you're stressed or suffer with anxiety, then when you're trying to go to bed at night, these thoughts really start to intrude our minds, and you might find that this is happening at other parts of the day. I know it used to happen for me, particularly when I was stressed and burned out. My inner thoughts would be going crazy, and I was therefore kind of distracted from what I was trying to do because my thoughts just kept popping in and distracting me. So does anybody here get those thoughts in their head in a kind of intrusive way, in a way that you wish wouldn't happen? But have you ever paid much attention to this chatter? What sort of stuff comes up? Are there any particular themes that come up on a regular basis? Any particular worries or concerns or doubts? I think it's really useful to keep a journal or a pad next to your bed. So as you're lying down at night and these thoughts are popping in, you can get them out of your mind and put them onto paper. And then maybe after a week or two, actually flick back through it and see if there are any recurring thoughts, any recurring doubts or worries, or anything in particular that just keeps cropping up. Because if it keeps cropping up, that tells me that there's an underlying concern there maybe, or worry or doubt, and it's definitely worth addressing it. But we tend to not pay much attention to these thoughts. They flit in and they flit out. But if they are recurrent, if they're repeated, then that tells me there's something nagging going on there. Another way to deal with any kind of intrusive thought chatter, so when it's getting in your way of what you're doing at work or stopping you from sleeping or waking you up, is to meditate and or do yoga. And this is really beneficial because in meditation and yoga, what we do is we focus on the breath. So we're taking our focus away from our thoughts and bringing it to our breath, which allows us to have a nice, clear, calm, peaceful mind. So yes, yoga and meditation are really great for helping with that thought chatter, and in particular if it's gotten quite intrusive, because we are drawing our attention to our breath, which allows our mind to have some space, some peace, and to just have some quiet from that incessant chatter that's going on all the time. So that's thought chatter. What I wanted to do now is talk about the inner critic. And that's that devil on your shoulder that says, "You're crap, you can't do that, you're not pretty enough, you're not clever enough, you're too ugly, you're not as good as her, you'll fail, you're lazy, you're stupid." It's that nasty voice in your head that creates doubt, low self-esteem and low self-worth. And it's really hard to go about your life in a kind of natural, carefree way when you feel like somebody is watching you 24/7, and that person that is watching you is very judgmental and very critical, even if that is actually the voice inside your own head, even if it's you. But it's hard to just relax into life and just be natural, to be yourself, when you feel like somebody is watching you and waiting to criticize your every move. Now, what does your inner critic say? So I've had loads of limiting beliefs. I think that you can get rid of limiting beliefs, but there will be new ones that crop up. You know, we're onions, and when you deal with one set of beliefs and criticisms of yourself, then other ones will come to the surface. And in a minute, I'll explain how one of my particular ones gets challenged on a regular basis. So I've many inner critics in my head, but the common ones that come up are you're boring and you're stupid. And this is something I've had to battle with time and time again, but I have made major progress, but it's not yet gone away. So in my old job in investments, I had to go out and do presentations to financial advisors about stock markets, interest rates, mutual funds, all sorts of investments. And this little voice in my head, well, it wasn't a little voice actually, it was a big voice. It used to shout really loud, would say stuff like, how can you possibly teach men that are twice your age anything about the economy? What do you know about interest rates? You look really nervous when you stand up there. You're going to look stupid. They're going to think that you've wasted your time. This is the sort of voice that would come into my head. And how that would play out would be like 2 weeks in advance of any particular presentation, I would feel really nervous. And I knew that I needed to write my presentation and collate it and put it together, but I would put it off. And I would put it off and put it off and put it off right until the day before. And then, of course, that inner critic was saying all those things 10 times louder because the event was actually happening, but also because I now felt underprepared. So procrastination is how my inner critic played out in day-to-day life. And it's interesting because I actually met my old sales director last week, and he talked about how I would needlessly over-prepare for presentations or anything that I had to deliver, really, but actually my nerves never showed up. Which is interesting because I always thought that people could hear the crack in my voice, that they could see that my insides were shaking and that my cheeks were bright red. And I did actually do a presentations course once, and they recorded us and we watched it back, and I was surprised to see that my nerves didn't show up. But I felt in that moment that they were on display and that everybody could see them and that they would know that I was nervous because I was crap at what I was doing, because I'm boring and I'm stupid. So I no longer do that job, but I am now an online entrepreneur, and online means that I need to show up. And prior to being an online entrepreneur, I'd only ever shared the odd picture on Facebook. I'd only ever shared other people's stuff, might put the odd picture of myself up there, but very rare. So to become an online entrepreneur and show up so that I'm visible to people, I've had to learn to show my face. Actually showing my whole body on Facebook was a big challenge for me to overcome. I have also had to go live. So doing this, I had weeks feeling petrified. I had such a battle with being able to actually sit here, because this for me is like showing up to be judged. And of course, the biggest judge of it was myself. It was my inner critic. It was that voice in my head saying, no one gives a crap what you've got to say, Natalie. You're stupid. Everybody knows this stuff already. Who gives a crap about what you've got to say? And I've actually signed up to do like a 7 days of lives challenge. And that's because I want to push myself and silence that inner critic by taking action, which proves to my inner cheerleader, which I'll come to in a minute, which proves to my inner cheerleader that actually my critic is wrong. Yeah, so that's the important bit, is actually taking action to prove to your critic that they are wrong about what they say. As I've posted pictures, as I have shown my whole body, as I have gone live, I have silenced that inner critic. That voice has gotten quieter and less frequent, and my inner cheerleader has started to get louder. She's like, yeah, Natalie, you can do it, you can do this, you can push through it, you're great. People love to hear what you say. Look at all the people that turned up to listen to it. Look at all the people that commented. Now, in the past, that inner critic was the biggest, most frequent, loudest voice, but I've managed to bring that down so it's just a little tiny, quiet voice here that pipes up every now and again. And my inner cheerleader is now the star of the show and talks more often and talks down that inner critic. And what's brought that inner critic of you're boring and stupid up lately is that I want to go and do an Insta story. So I'm quite happy to post pictures of myself on Insta story, but I want to talk. And I want to do that because I want to keep pushing myself and challenging and growing and developing my confidence and self-esteem. So I am battling with at the moment that voice that says, no one cares. But I really want to do an Insta story where I'm talking. So the way that I try to get over this is to take action to prove to my inner critic that it's wrong. And the way that I make myself do that and push over that fear barrier is by telling people. So what does your inner critic say? What are the common things that it comes up with? I mean, other ones that I've dealt with are, you're not pretty enough, you're not slim enough, loads of them, so many to think of, but I've smashed through a lot of them now, which is nice. And interestingly, when we say these negative things about ourselves, we tend to assume that they are facts, but in reality, they are just strongly held opinions. And that's why coaching helps, because I will challenge people's limiting beliefs and dig down to where that limiting belief comes from, and I will weaken the evidence that they have collated to confirm that negative belief about themselves. I start to question the evidence that they have got against that, and then they start to realize that actually there's no real proof there, and that they've been holding this negative belief about themselves inaccurately. And then I will help them to build more positive beliefs about themselves. So what do we do about this inner critic then? Well, first of all, we need to become aware of it. And I've been able to work really hard on my mindset and actually kind of slow down my thought process. So these thoughts were flying in and out of my head all the time. I didn't hear it say, you're boring. I felt the response to that in my chest and like the shaking in my body, but I didn't hear the actual words that it said. It was kind of happening in the background because I was so used to it talking all the time that I wasn't consciously paying attention to it. So it's the first step is to actually pay attention to the thoughts that are going on in your head. So the other day I wrote, I didn't write it, I reposted a piece of content on Facebook that I'd used about 8 months ago. I'd got a really good response to it at the time, so I thought I'm going to repost it because my audience has changed and grown since then, and I think it would be beneficial. And again, I got a really good response. And I thought to myself, well, I need to write some more content like that. And then what I heard was my voice in my head said, you can't write like that anymore. Now, in the past, that thought would have come and gone and I'd have paid no attention to it. What I'd have done is procrastinated and not written anything. So I would have responded to it, but I wouldn't have actually heard it. But because I have changed the way in which my mind works, I heard that voice. I was actually shocked that I heard it say, you can't write like that anymore. But I was really grateful that I heard it because it meant that my inner cheerleader could pipe up and say, shut up, yes you can, you've written loads of stuff like that. And I went ahead and wrote the piece of paper. So become aware of the thoughts that are going on in your head. Just almost slow it down, start to pay attention, make a deliberate, concerted effort to start being aware of what's said in your mind. Also be aware of when it shows up. So does this inner critic show up when you're alone? Does it show up when you're out in a social environment? Does it show up when you're at work? And how does it show up? Does it show up as procrastination? Does it show up as a drop in energy? Does it show up in fear or nerves? How does it actually show up for you? So I know for me, my main way of my inner critic showing up is procrastination. I will want to do something, but I'll keep putting it off, and I'll realize maybe a week or two down the line that I've created all sorts of excuses as to why I haven't done it. Like I don't have enough time, or there wasn't enough people around, or didn't have the subject. I will make up reasons as to why I hadn't done it. But ultimately what's happening is I am listening subconsciously or consciously to my inner critic, which is saying you'll be crap at it. So become aware of that inner critic. This is why a journal is really useful. Write it down any time of the day, but make sure that you've got peace and quiet so that you can actually hear what's cropping up. Make sure that your inner critic is the smaller voice. You know, right now it's probably the louder, most noisy, most frequent voice in your head. But once you start to become aware of what it says, you can use your inner cheerleader to quieten that voice, and the cheerleader starts to get bigger and more frequent. And there's some things that you can throw back, you know, back chat that inner critic of yours and say, so what? Just because you think that does not mean that you are right. Yeah? Just because you've had that thought, it doesn't mean that it is true. Thoughts are just thoughts. They are not reality. It's as simple as that. The second thing is, who cares, inner critic, what you think? Because I don't. Who cares? And the third one is, why shouldn't I do this? What is it? Because I'm not worthy? Why do you feel like you're not worthy? And also, just do it anyway. What we need to do is to take action that disproves our beliefs, and then that action informs the outcome, and that outcome informs our beliefs. So sometimes we've just got to take the action, even if we don't feel confident and we don't feel good enough. Do it anyway, because the outcome will then inform your belief, and you start this positive cycle going on. Now, that inner critic, I'm afraid to say, is not likely to go away, but we can reduce the amount of airtime that we get, and we can definitely start making the cheerleader the star of the show. You know, give it the biggest share. But for me, affirmations are such a fantastic way to challenge my inner critic. So thank you very much. Love you all. Have a great evening and see you soon. Mwah. Thank you for watching my video. If you found that useful, why not subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to push the notification button so that you'll be alerted anytime I post a new video, so that you won't miss out on my top tips for living a happy, healthy, productive and stress-free life.